Welcome to our channel. We're so happy to have you here. Don't forget to subscribe and help us hit our goal of 100,000 subscribers. The actress Noel Francis. Best known as a tough gal sidekick in 1930s films, she started out as a Follies girl and was a well-known singer-dancer on Broadway in the 1920s. Fame never came, and she dropped off the radar in 1937. President Grant reading a newspaper 4 days before he died of throat cancer. He wore high-collar shirts to hide his tumors and became mute towards the end. The beginning of the Holocaust, Nazis enforcing an official boycott of Jewish shops and stores in Germany. The last photograph of the complete Israeli team at the 1972 Munich Olympics before 11 of them would be kidnapped in the early hours of the next morning and eventually killed by Palestinian terrorists. A terrible sight. Children dressed in rags were forced to work in non-safe environments, their innocent young faces reddened from a workday that seemed to never end, and the abolishment of child labor was unfortunately decades away. Easy Company paratrooper Forrest Guth at the Marmion farm in Normandy in June 1944. 65 years later, Guth posed again with his captured German helmet as he did in 1944. Emperor Napoleon III, the last monarch to rule France, with his wife Empress Eugenie and son Louis Napoleon, circa 1865. New York Department of Public Charities. Inspector speaking with Ida List, 8 years old, of 124 Ridge Street, September 16, 1913. Ida suffers from St. Vitus dance, Korea. Her mother works and takes in sewing. Her father is an alcoholic. Unusual and rare photograph of Winston Churchill feeding his pet white kangaroo, Digger, the only albino kangaroo in Europe, at London Zoo, Regent's Park, 1948. Some leaders of various nationalist women's organizations of Europe, Olga Bjoner, Gertrude Schultz-Klink, Toyoko Oshima, simply the wife of the Japanese ambassador to Germany, Pilar Primo de Rivera, and Olga Medici during the International Women's Meeting in Berlin, 7th October 1941. Evangelical Field Mass for Girls of the BDM and Boys of the Hitler Youth, 1933. In 1977, Joyce McKinney, a former Miss Wyoming, was arrested for kidnapping Mormon missionary Kirk Anderson from his church and holding him captive as her sex slave for 3 days. Hitler Youth, viewing a Tibetan Buddhist grain mandala held by a lama in a 5 Tathagata Buddha crown. A circus performer in an aquarium car with crocodiles, Berlin, 1933. Misha bint Fahd al-Saud was a 19-year-old Saudi princess who was, on 15 July 1977, executed in a car park in Jeddah for adultery. Herero in chains. During the colonial period in German Southwest Africa, now Namibia, the Germans brutally suppressed the indigenous population. At least 60% Herero and 50% Nama population were killed in the Herero and Nama genocide, 1904-08. Herero in chains. During the colonial period in German Southwest Africa, now Namibia, the Germans brutally suppressed the indigenous population. At least 60% Herero and 50% Nama population were killed in the Herero and Nama genocide, 1904-08. A full day's barrage of 105mm shells during a World War I offensive on German trenches in 1916. After the revolution in Iran, women protest against the mandatory wearing of the hijab. Iran, 1979. Mishilat Madhavan from Mahe may be the only Indian ever to be executed by the Nazis. A bandit in western Tibet. Picture by Lee Gautami Govinda between 1947 and 1949. The Prudential skyscraper in flames at the height of the Warsaw Uprising, August to October 1944. 13-year-old Barbara Kent, center, and her fellow campers play in a river near Ruidoso, New Mexico, on July 16, 1945, just hours after the atomic bomb detonation 40 miles away. Barbara was the only person in the photo that lived to see 30 years old. Intervar Czechoslovak Express train Slovenska Strela ready for departure at Prague's Wilson Station, 1936. The first morning after Sweden switched from driving on the left to the right, 1967. Entertainer Thomas Ernest Hare not much amused by Prohibition, 1920s. The coronation of the Emperor of the Central African Republic, Bokassa. It consumed a third of the car's budget, and among the dishes served was the meat of his political opponents. Soviet soldier in Goebbels' room, May 1945, photographed by William von der Wert. One of the most widely distributed photos of the abolitionist movement, taken on the 2nd of April, 1863. Mark Felt, the Associate Director of the FBI, second highest rank, who is famous for being the anonymous whistleblower known as Deep Throat, who assisted in implicating the White House's role in the Watergate scandal. An exotic dancer demonstrates that her underwear was too large to have exposed herself after undercover police officers arrested her in Florida. On this day 50 years ago, the NVA and the Viet Cong captured the South Vietnamese capital of Saigon. As the city fell, tens of thousands of people began to scale the walls of the U.S. Embassy, but in the end, only 5,500 Vietnamese would be helicoptered out by American forces. Seabees of the 33rd Naval Construction Battalion defused Japanese ordnance at an ammo dump on Peleliu. On this day in 1996, the Port Arthur massacre in Australia began. 35 people were killed and 23 were wounded. Australia immediately went about reforming gun laws, and around 650,000 firearms were collected and destroyed. This photo shows some of the guns collected. Jackie Robinson, a baseball hero for the Brooklyn Dodgers, sits with his wife Rachel on the front steps of their house in 1949, holding his baby son Jackie Jr. on his lap. Nina Lean took the picture. The Kerman children with their French governess at a runestone, U-107, at the Antuna estate, Sweden. The inscription says, Gerlach had in memory of Hemming, his son, and Ernmund in memory of Holmfrid, his wife, and in memory of Unna, his daughter. Children go to class at a damaged school in Stalingrad, shortly after the ferocious battle that killed over 1 million, 1943. New York. Miss Henrietta Miele giving an iron ring to a contributor, October 22, 1914. During World War I, German Americans started program Gold für Eisen, where donors traded their gold wedding rings for iron ones, which was used to fund the German war effort. A group of Japanese samurai photographed in front of the Sphinx in Giza, Egypt, during a visit to the country, 1864. In order to prevent being mistaken for Japanese in 1942, a Chinese-American military worker in Los Angeles wore a handwritten sign in his back. A picture taken by my German ancestor, the enemy Russians standing over their trench, World War I Eastern Front 1917. This is beautician Max Factor with his invention, the Beauty Calibrator, a device designed to show which parts of a woman's face needed more or less makeup. Young students use their cars to protest integration in Little Rock High School, Arkansas, September of 1958. Pictures of the Christmas truce, 1914, when German and French soldiers celebrated Christmas together at the front. American soldiers moved down a street in Waldenburg after a recent raid by the 63rd Division, 16th April, 1945. Mexican brachero worker is sprayed with DDT in processing center in El Paso, Texas, 1956. In some centers, they were given a shower of kerosene which caused the death of 25 people once. The Hassanlu lovers died around 800 WS and were discovered in 1972. They died in what seems to be an embrace or kiss, and remained that way for 2,800 years. A photograph taken by the American W.L. Sachtleben, depicting the victims of a massacre of Armenians in Erzurum on October 30, 1895, being gathered for burial at the town's Armenian cemetery. Harutyun Hovakimian and a group of people are excavating the remains of Armenian victims from the earth in Deir Zor, dating back to 1938. The Sunbeam 1000 PK racing car shown here before departure, Wolverhampton, England, 1927. A protester shows the blood-stained shirt of Edson Luiz de Lima Souto, one of the first students to be killed by the Brazilian military dictatorship, March 28, 1968. On December 7, 1970, German Chancellor Willy Brandt fell to his knees at the memorial to the Warsaw Ghetto. American troops prepare Nazi Major General Anton Dostler for execution for killing 15 OSS men, Italy, 1945. 80 years of Elbe Day. American and Soviet soldiers meet for the first time in Germany. Shoichi Yokoi, the Japanese soldier who hid in the jungle in Guam for 27 years to avoid capture, weeps upon his return to Japan in February 1972. Captured Jews during Warsaw Ghetto uprising led by the Germans for deportation to death camps. Picture taken at Noah Lippi Street near the intersection with Smocha. Depressing photo of a polar bear hunt in 1920, Ellesmereland Bay off the coast of Greenland. With great difficulty, the animal was successfully lassoed close to the ship. June 3, 1981. Punk band, The Plasmatics, in a Milwaukee courtroom after singer Wendy O. Williams was arrested on indecency charges for simulating masturbation with a microphone during a concert and assaulting a cop. Charges were eventually dropped. Animators in Disney using models to make the car chase scene in 101 Dalmatians work, 1961. The Lysenko brothers, all 10 served in the Second World War and all 10 returned home. Daredevil Jamie Reynolds performing a balancing act atop a building in Washington, 1917. Paul McCartney carrying 2 of his kids. Beside him stands Heather, Linda McCartney's daughter from a previous marriage, and behind him is Christopher Lee. A surreal moment in the mid-1970s. Agatha Christie, renowned for her masterful detective novels, also harbored a lesser-known passion for surfing. In 1922, during a visit to Waikiki Beach in Hawaii, she became one of the first Western women to ride a surfboard. 2 girls sporting their circle skirts and saddle shoes, 1950s. No word if they went on to work at Schott's Brewery with Squiggy and Lenny. Make War Not Love. U.S. Marine Corporal Michael Wynn, 20, of Columbus, Ohio, taking a breather from battle at Da Nang, South Vietnam, 1967. The Pickelhaube Pyramid, a victory monument in New York made out of 12,000 German helmets, 1919. An Indian woman, a Japanese woman, and a Syrian woman, all training to be doctors at Women's Medical College of Philadelphia. October 10, 1885. Japanese troops, after their conquest of Nanking, Nanjing, between 100,000 to 200,000 people who were Chinese were murdered in the event known as the Rape of Nanking. A U.S. soldier offers his hand to a woman leaving a cave where she had hidden with her child during the battle between Japanese and American forces. Saipan, 1944. Ira Hayes, a Native American Marine immortalized raising the American flag over Iwo Jima, sits in a Los Angeles jail cell, 1953. Crippling PTSD and unwanted fame saw Hayes arrested 52 times for public intoxication after the war. He froze to death in the Arizona desert while drunk in 1955.